From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, January 8th, and you're listening to the HPS Macrocast. I'm Matt McDonald in for Tony Fratto this week, and I'm joined here, as always, by John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. We also have my HPS colleague, Bryan DeAngelis, joining us to go over some of the political implications from this past week. A happy New Year. Welcome to Season 3 of the HPS Macrocast. I will say that this week has made it hard to discern whether 2020 just keeps going on and on and on, or whether we are actually in a new year. It's been another week of chaos and doesn't really feel like we've turned the page on last year. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case for a little while, but we'll go through all of that in a very busy week that was. Today was Jobs Day, but that's kind of the capstone of a week of tons of activity. We had the conclusion of the Georgia runoffs toward the beginning of the week that resolved Democratic control of the Senate. We had a extremely long day of acceptance of the electoral votes in the Capitol, with a Donald Trump rally, incitement to riot, and followed by a storming of the Capitol, in which I think at the latest count, 4 people died. A
police officer died today, so it's 5. Yeah,
including one person who was shot during the riots. We've had a subsequent to that, we had a video released from the president, who's been banned from most of his social media platforms. There's talk of invoking the 25th Amendment, impeachment. We'll get to all that. But today is Jobs Day. We do have news on that. December jobs numbers, we lost 140,000 jobs in December. This is the first loss since April and really the beginning of the pandemic. Unemployment was unchanged at 6.7%. Brendan, what did you see in the numbers there?
I think there was 3 big events in kind of that encapsulate the reality of the job market. One, massive losses in leisure and hospitality. It was almost 500,000 people lost their job there. You don't have to overthink that one. We've shut down a lot of the economy, so you can't go to bars and restaurants and whatnot. And then we also lost about 50,000 jobs at the state and local level, which we'll get into later. But in the relief bill, they cut out the state and local funding. So you're starting to see losses, in education, and then cops and firefighters have to be laid off. And then also with the wages. So average hourly earnings were up, but it's really a statistical anomaly, because so many of the 500,000 people that lost their jobs were lower wage. They come out of the calculation, so their lower contributions are taken out, and you just have the higher wage earners. So it really is the reality is the opposite. If people are losing their jobs and going to zero, not the people are making more money.
Yeah, the wages is a composition effect. It's basically you take out, you take out of the averaging lower wage earners who no longer have jobs, and the average goes up. But that's not good news.
If you have 2 7-foot people and a 4-foot person, and the 4-foot person gets taken out, the average becomes 7 feet tall.
Yeah, I feel like the jobs. I mean, we talked about this during last Jobs Day, but I feel like the fact that we're not really gonna that we're kind of looking at status quo on the jobs front until we get past, in some form, the pandemic.
Exactly.
And I feel like after a week of chaos, is that this is just another reminder of the slow-moving disaster of the pandemic that continues to plague the country.
And really, the only solution is at the federal level. No one else has the money to be able to help.
On the economic front.
On the economic front, we're battling a virus that means that you're not supposed to interact with other people. So the only way to keep small businesses alive is at the federal level. There's just, you need trillions of dollars to do this. There's a lot of fundraising going on. Like Barstool Sports raised $20 million, which is great, but it's completely irrelevant. We need a couple more zeros on that.
And it makes the case for the low wage workers. You were talking about the last stimulus, the debate over $600 versus $2,000 extended unemployment insurance. I mean, I think this is where you'll see new president and Democratic majorities take up in January. But
and I think the reason that we're going to have, I think the reason we're going to have a Senate run by the Democrats is because the Georgian voters were mad that the Republicans blocked that aid.
That's right.
Not the full story, but I think it's part of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the political side of this week. I mean, we had a resolution on Georgia. That took actually a couple of days for kind of final results.
No, it was quicker than we thought. Georgia's done an amazing job.
Yeah, well, but the reality is that, like, I think the Purdue race was called as McConnell was giving a speech on the floor about the importance of preserving the republic. I mean, It has been a wild week from a political perspective. We saw the president of the United States inciting a riot that resulted in the invasion of the Capitol. It's weird to see people trying to discern and quibble over whether this was a coup or an insurrection or a riot or a mob or what appellation you apply to it. But it was just, it was the craziest and most radical political moment I think I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Confederate flag was in the halls of Congress.
Yeah. The whole thing was completely insane. It's funny when the first thing I did after it might've been like a week after the election last fall was I turned off my Twitter notifications for Donald Trump, which is probably my little bit
that
of,
long?
Well,
you had to before.
Yeah,
it was part of
sure.
It's just he used that platform to drive the news, and I found it quite cathartic to just check that one off for 2020 last fall, but it was notable watching coverage over the period of time when all this went on, when his social media accounts were suspended, and the raging megaphone of Donald Trump became a bit of a black hole over that period of time. And the pause was certainly welcome. There's been, because of his incitement, there's been talk of invoking the 25th Amendment. You have Vice President Pence carrying out his duties under, continued beratement by the president. You've had, as of right now, as of this recording, there's been at least 2 cabinet members and several other senior members of the administration that have resigned. You have Democrats in Congress looking at impeachment for a second time, though the timetables on both of these add a question of practicality.
Well, so interesting point on the impeachment. So they're saying they could do it in 6 to 7 days, but most importantly, constitutional scholars I'd say that you can impeach a president after he's out of office, which then bans him from ever running for Congress again. So I think one way or the other, we're impeaching him. We're definitely going to impeach him. Whether it makes it through the Senate is the question.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the House does it before the inauguration, and then that'll be the debate whether the Senate ever actually picks it up.
Yeah,
I would add to that the question of prosecution generally. I think that some of the early we should note the president released a video saying it's probably as close to a concession speech as we're going to get, but saying that there will be a transfer of power. I forget if he said there will be a peaceful transfer of power. That's something that he clearly didn't facilitate. Probably that's going to be that may be the blackest of black marks on a presidency that will probably go down in infamy. It's early to write the history on everything, but I mean, this week has been dark to say the least, and the peaceful transfer of power is the foundation of the democracy. When you look at that final discussion that final video, it does seem like the one thing that has cowed him over time, or that he's had concerns on, is prosecution. So now you're seeing conversations on like his self-pardoning, which is, a massive constitutional question. I don't think that it is. I am assuming that in addition to impeachment, I think that a Biden administration, Brian, I'm curious for your perspective on this. I think that a Biden administration that seemed like incoming President Biden was looking to turn the page. It's not clear to me that given this week that there won't be a serious look at the possibility of prosecution across perhaps multiple dimensions. I think that that's very much on the table. It's not clear to me that resignation isn't still on the table if he thought there was some sort of way he could resign and get a pardon.
Yeah, I'll start with that last point. It would not shock me at all if he leaves the presidency in the next few days with some kind of hope that Pence then pardons him, because I think there'll be a lot of questions.
He's got to pardon his kids first.
That's right. He supposedly has a list, but I think you're right, Matt. I went into this week thinking that Biden would look to turn the page, that others, there's cases up in New York, there's other issues, would focus on the prosecution of the president outside of some of the federal issues.
But you can't be pardoned from.
You cannot be pardoned from yeah, that's right. But I think both this Justice Department is going to look at several of these rioters and the folks involved in it, including Giuliani and others who spoke at those rallies. And I expect the new AG nominee, Merrick Garland, and others will allow those to proceed. I don't think you'll see Biden, at the podium demanding prosecution of the former president, but he's going to let his Justice Department follow the law. And that could lead to prosecutions of a lot of the president's inner circle, if not himself.
Yeah, I think that's correct. All right. Well, that's it. So there's been a lot to cover. Let's take a quick break. I do want to look at where policy is going, where the markets are going. There's more to talk about in what happened this week than we have time for, but it is the first podcast of 2021, so we should also look at the year ahead. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Markets Policy Partners provides sophisticated financial market analysis that is independent, accessible, and actionable for a broad audience. Learn more at marketspolicy.com or visit them on Twitter @marketspolicy.
All right, we're back with the HPS Macrocast. This is Matt McDonald. I'm joined with Bryan DeAngelis, my colleague from Hamilton Place Strategies, and John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. So we talked a little bit about the chaos this week in Washington, in the news generally, and all the activity. John, what were the markets doing during this week, and how did they respond to all of this?
I think the markets were, while everything was transpiring in the Capitol and the terrible scenes of disorder and violence were disturbing and distressing, the markets were marching to all-time highs. U.S. equities were up to start the day and maintained gains even as situation deteriorated at downtown in Washington, D.C. and at the Capitol. And closed the day with really robust gains and continued higher. And this is really two takes on this. We've seen this dynamic through a lot of very bad months of the pandemic with markets charging higher here. And it's on one score, it does seem sort of indecent and plays to the worries about the rich getting richer and the pandemic exacerbating inequality here. There's also the viewpoint that this really is proof positive that markets are drunk on liquidity, and monetary stimulus has deadened, along with other things like passive investing and algos, and the Robinhood crowd has deadened fundamental price discovery to such an extent that even the horrifying events of Wednesday can't move the needle in terms of selling off stocks. And I think that's, those are legitimate takes, but that doesn't completely overbalance the fundamental rationale for some of this. And you could see it on Wednesday. The markets were up after the Georgia runoff results, and they were up very smartly. And this is because the unified government under the Democrats is expected to deliver a much more muscular degree of fiscal support, both in the near-term stimulus and in the longer-term investment categories. And this comes in an environment where there's extreme division within the Republican Party as well. Those narrow majorities, the narrowest of majorities in the Senate that the Democrats are enjoying here, are against a GOP caucus that is as divided as I think anybody can remember. That points to the ability, I think, of the Biden administration to be able to get through bigger and beefier spending packages, because we've seen some of the populist Republicans in the Trump faction going for that. Right. But as divided as the GOP is right now, they'll certainly be able to circle the wagons to oppose tax hikes. and with a very narrow Democrat majority, the kind of tax increases that they can get through their moderate wing are, diminished, I think, in the view of Wall Street. So you have this, and against the backdrop of course, the resurgence in COVID and the terrible damage that our country has gone through here, is putting the viewpoint. Market participants are really trying to look ahead to the coming quarters, when the unified government creates a more coherent and pro-growth environment down the road. And that's what we've seen this week, boosting market spirits amid all the darkness.
This does feel like I don't know how you phrase it. It's the most closely divided total control of the two branches of government that I can recall. It's pretty interesting. And it's interesting to think about what the priorities look like and what that implies in terms of the ability to get things done. I think John is describing a market perception of from a market's view, a Goldilocks pro-growth window where, what the markets would see as the most positive kind of fiscal stimulus is likely to happen, and what would be presumably a drag in terms of tax policy is likely to be limited in this context. But Bryan, you've spent time on both sides.
And that's an important point, because we're focused on the Senate, but the House is really just as tight. Lobbyists told me you can pick off 5 congressmen on any bill.
Yeah, but although I'll say I think that's where it will get tricky. So I think you all are right. We hit the Goldilocks for the markets, but that's probably only for the first quarter or so. I think they'll get $2,000, checks out. I think they'll get a stimulus package. I think they'll get infrastructure. And then we'll get to that point where the progressive side of the party starts to get itchy, and they start demanding the more aggressive policy platforms that wanted to see with full control of government. That'll get hard. And I think the House in particular will be fascinating to watch, as AOC and that squad wing of the party, those votes now matter even more than they did last Congress, because Pelosi can't really lose anything.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind is, Biden has held off on naming some pretty important regulators. And with 50 votes, he'll now be able to go where he wants to go on, or where the party wants him to go on CFPB, on SEC, on some other important financial folks, where a Republican Senate may have forced him to moderate that. He's now got, the 50 votes he needs to do what he wants.
There's another interesting dimension to this too. And I think you see the beginnings of it on the SALT debate, where, contra like typical norms, you have Democrats arguing for what are in effect are lower taxes, mostly on higher income individuals, and you have Republicans kind of holding the line on less tax breaks in terms of SALT. It is going to be
Pelosi had put that in the first relief bill, right, back in November, right? I think Pelosi had included SALT in one of the.
SALT's been something that they've been pushing for a while. I would just say that there is as the Democratic Party moves toward a higher educated constituency, as suburbs become more of a base for the Democratic Party, even as you have an ascendant progressive wing, is that the tax issue is going to start to cut in multiple ways for now core constituencies for the party. So it's even as like the rhetoric has moved in that direction, I'm not sure where the political reality starts to land on some of those issues. I will say on the other side is that I do think that over, say, the past decade is that the repeated lesson that Democrats seem to take away is like, when you have all the levers of power, it's time to use them. And perceptions that you miss that window, I think, have haunted the party a little bit, rightly or wrongly. I don't know that that's necessarily explicitly true, but I think that is the perception. So I think that the pressure, especially from progressives, especially from people who view their seats as safer, is going to be to go big.
Yeah, I think that's big on climate change. I think that's big on some issues that tend to fade during an election, but are very important to the base. Gun control dominated the conversation for a long time last Congress, and then sort of disappeared a little bit in November. But, I think you'll see issues like that come back, and they'll say, this is our time to do something, and try to put it on some Republicans too, who, they don't have an easy map in 2022. McConnell's got 20 plus seats to defend. He's got several folks who are, pushing 90 and might likely retire. And that's North Carolina, that's Pennsylvania, that's other places where Democrats are starting to compete.
So let me ask you on these issues. So we know in the year 2021, you have two opportunities to pass things through reconciliation. Is there anything that you think could just get 60 votes? And not have to do reconciliation?
Yeah, I certainly think a stimulus or an infrastructure package could get 60 votes.
I agree.
I think there's...
But you have to keep it narrow. You can't tack on other progressive...
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's where you keep an eye on the House, because there'll be some pressure in the Senate, but that House makeup is, as Matt said, very tight. Yep. And the House, regardless...
And they also...
Because
he appointed 3 congressmen. Yeah. It's even tighter in the beginning because the 3 that are in the administration, those seats need to be filled.
Right. And keep in mind, I forget the number, someone can help me out, but I think it was 120, House Republicans that still voted to object post-riot to some of those things. So, Trump's still got a very loyal base there as well.
Yeah, and the Democrats lost a lot of seats in the midterm. Yeah. Not the midterm, the election. So, if you're kind of in a purplish state, you're not going to want to go too crazy in terms of progressive agenda.
And it feels like a lifetime ago, but we remember the Spanberger versus AOC, Connor Lamb fights right after the election of like, who's to blame for these losses? Did we go too far left? Did we not go left enough?
Yeah.
And that'll come back. That didn't go away because
the other thing I'll say on the dynamics on the Republican side is that relevant to our conversation on stimulus is that, the compositional effects are not just about like the wage numbers in the jobs report, is that you have a compositional effect with populism and the movement of educated voters and all this sort of stuff. And you saw this with the debate on the $2,000 checks in the Republican side, is that the Republican Party has become a much more populist party than it was in the past. And I think that there will be issues, especially on the stimulus side, like that issue where, if the Biden administration wants to push on different dimensions, they're going to be pushing on an open door on that side too.
That's right.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk a little bit about what's to come.
On the first Friday of every month, HPS analyzes the latest jobs and labor market data in a digestible format. Sign up for our reports at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or on Twitter at HPS Insight.
All right, we're back on the HPS Macrocast. Let's talk. It's probably a fool's errand to talk about the rest of 2021 at this point, but let's talk a little bit about what's to come in January and what we should expect. We have the presidential inauguration. We have the countdown of the death throes of the Trump administration. There will be, Congress, I guess, is supposed to be out of session, but given the events, there may be movement to come back to initiate impeachment proceedings. Normally at this stage, there'd be more discussion of like getting a jump start on a Biden administration agenda, but as has been the case throughout, Trump is the one who just won't go away. Bryan, what do you expect on all those fronts over the coming weeks from just kind of what the priorities will be?
Yeah, well, starting with that last point, just a quick comment. I think Biden will be one of the first presidents, at least in a long time, to start with no cabinet officials confirmed, which is fascinating. But I do think, that the events of this week are going to cause some action in Congress. I think the House will come back next week. I think they will impeach. Practically, I do think time is not on anyone's side with that. So I think the Senate will run out the clock till Election Day. And the question is there any sort of deal that Trump cuts where, he disappears a little early and gives Pence a couple days as president? I'm not convinced yet. I think he hangs out, but I do think he gets impeached and goes down in history as the only president to be impeached twice.
Wait, okay, so he gets impeached, and then we had the conversation before about whether if he's convicted after the fact, there are certain implications. Do you think that the beginning of the Biden administration is an impeachment trial in the Senate for Donald Trump?
I forget the rules, but I don't think the Senate has to ever pick it up. Is that right? So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that happened the last time. McConnell sat on it for a while.
Yeah. So I think he's just impeached.
But McConnell's not going to be the majority leader.
Right. Yeah, because
Schumer
it's not dependent on Trump being the president. So Schumer will take it up on the 21st or whatever, maybe 20th. Yeah.
Poor Biden. This is the guy that just won't go away. Can't get rid of him.
Well, that's right. Poor Schumer. Already facing a primary challenge. Yeah, so that'll be tough, I guess.
It's an interesting vote for Republicans this time because you have the power to get rid of Trump. If you convict him, he can't be president ever again. And you don't have to deal with it in 2024.
Well, I don't know that you don't have to deal with it, but I do think that there's a little bit of like
he can be a kingmaker, but he can't be president.
Well, I don't know. This is obviously a complex dynamic, but there is a little bit of like emperor has no clothes, punch the bully in the face theory to all of this, is that if you drive Trump approvals down to like, the sub 20s, I forget, he's probably in like the mid 20s or something now. If you drive it down that far, he increasingly becomes less of a factor, or there's a marginalization that happens there. I mean, there's a lot of bandwagon effect in politics, and
right.
Someone can seem invincible until they're completely not, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, Schumer would
whether
need
it's a decision.
17.
I think there's 10 Republicans that would vote to.
Well, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah, you don't need all 49. You just need 10.
You need 17. You need
it's 17. You need a majority. Yeah, 2/3.
Two-thirds. Yeah. So I don't think it happens in the Senate. I don't think he's convicted.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So, on the record, everyone, do you think that Donald Trump will be president up until the moment that Joe Biden is sworn in? What do you think,
No,
Bryan?
I think he resigns a couple days early, simply because he wants to fly on Air Force One back home, and if on the 20th he would have to ask Biden to do it. So he'll resign a couple days early.
I'm going with Brendan, but for the different, the more conventional resign and be pardoned by Vice.
And that'll be part of it too. But I think the Air Force One is
his
more the driver.
His level of trust. He's going to have to take a leap of faith that Pence actually comes through.
Pence is not happy right now.
Oh man, those are cold knives. If that one went down.
Based on this conversation, I'll go with resign as well, because I think he'll try to get out of the way before Democrats have the power to even.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to be part of the inauguration. So just for that, he'll just resign early so he can get the hell out of town.
All right.
No,
and
he's
he
not
can keep Democrats.
Not allowed to live at Mar-a-Lago.
So everyone who knows me has known that since the beginning of the Trump presidency, I have always and consistently called a 50-50 shot that he ends his term at all, right? And so
you can cash in on your bet. Actually, that's interesting. Vegas probably could lose a lot of money on that if he resigned a day early.
Yeah, my take, I think he does resign. I think he resigns like as late as he possibly can. Like I bet Donald Trump resigns the morning of the inauguration day. And it's like there's like a swearing in of Pence right before Biden is inaugurated. I think he tries to take the pardon. I don't think that he wants to deal with the legal side of all the investigations that could cascade down. And I think that it's his last bit of reality television for the political circus. He would step on Joe Biden's inauguration, which would make him happy, and he would like have the legal confidence in that. And you wouldn't really have headlines. You wouldn't really have headlines on a President Pence, which clearly Trump doesn't want. I do think that like the question
traditionally, Matt, they meet the day before, right? And the president-elect stays at Blair House, and I think you're right. I think Trump avoids all of that.
I got a buyer.
No, that's my base case. I think he just wants to avoid any of the transition, and he wants to be able to fly on Air Force One to Florida.
And he will never stand next to Biden. He won't.
He doesn't. He'll never stand next to him.
No, he's petty. I do think that John's point is right, though, is that I think that what Trump would try to do is to jam Pence on the whole exercise, is literally have Pence be at president for hours, have the pardon and paperwork drawn up, be in the room together where all the pressure is to bear, and that like there's a guaranteed agreement that he'll like sign in, or he'll be sworn in and then sign on the dotted line for the pardon. And then that's it. That's the end of the administration. That's how he goes out. I do think there's a question of whether Pence goes along with the whole thing, Like, I think that if Trump resigned now, Pence might go along with it. I think that if Trump does the like pressure play for the final day, which I wouldn't shock me. I'm not sure that Pence goes along for like the.
But I still think Trump does it, irrelevant of the
if Pence doesn't agree to it, I think he tries to do a self-pardon.
Yeah. The most important question is, if it plays out like that, will sixth graders have to remember Pence as a president? Is he
I was 44th? Just thinking that. My kids have the little ruler with all the president's faces on it. I'm like, do we add Pence in there?
I mean, I guess technically he was president.
21 to 21, yeah.
It's not like, when you're when Reagan had surgery, technically that was a placeholder. Yeah. This time, he's actually the president of the United States.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. The closest analog is probably like, I don't know, wasn't there like a king of England who did that for a few hours before he abdicated or whatever? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, this would be the final precedent for Trump to shatter as he leaves a turd in the Oval Office on his way out the door.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if that all comes to pass, you heard it here first, and I will gloat incessantly for months on end. So everybody should hope that doesn't happen.
No, I'm gonna do some research on if Vegas is gonna lose some money if that happens.
Well, that's a good question. Does that count in the odds? Would they? I mean, he's technically resigned, right?
He did, yeah.
All right. That's it for this week. Thanks to everybody for listening. This is the HPS Macrocast. I'm Matt McDonald with Hamilton Place Strategies and my colleague Bryan DeAngelis. Thanks to John Fagan and Brendan Walsh of Markets Policy Partners. Have a great weekend. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.